All right, we are live. Welcome, everybody.
Hey.
To Campfires and Cat Holes.
All right.
Appreciate y'all being here.
It's good to be back.
We've got Mr. Brian Carlson from Carlson Adventures. We got Mr. Jeremy from All Things.
I mean, you're closer than most of the people that try to pronounce my name. I'm just saying.
Pronounce it or spell it right.
And I am, of course, Chris. I'm that hiking guy. And tonight we have a great guest, but I'm going to let Jeremy take over and let him talk about our guest tonight.
Well, before we do that, Chris, I got to do a little build up here because you're the
build up.
Yeah, okay. You're the one that's responsible for getting me into this topic. I just want you to know that.
Oh, that's right. I am, aren't I?
Yes, you are. So little backdrop. We're going to make this quick because we want to get our guest in here. A couple years ago, mainly January of 2022, or actually might have been February, but we went to LBL, Land Between the Lakes, and we were doing the second off-roading adventure I'd ever done. Yep. And I had David Gray with me and you, and we were going to meet up at that point. I was picking up David at Carmel. And then you said, hey, we've got this great site that you should go to and we'll camp out that night. And it's called Clay Bay. And I'm like, okay, cool. And you sent me the GPS coordinates and everything. It was awesome. So I start researching LBL. And it's funny, if you don't know much about LBL, if you just put in LBL doing a search, half the stuff that comes up is about the dogman of LBL. You know, they're the beast of LBL. And I had never heard of this before. Right. So all of a sudden it's like, it's that red button that you just can't help but push and you just start watching. So I went on this entire, I don't know, binge watching of all these things about the beast of LBL. Well, then fast forward to us driving to Clay Bay. We get there and we're at this beautiful campsite. The lake is way out of its banks. It's surrounding us like a swamp. It was hot, starting to go cold. And all of a sudden this mist starts coming in at the lake, off the lake at 11 o'clock. And then there's this clip. I would like for you to play this clip. And this, now we're getting into David talking about it. So if you could play that clip for me, that's in that first section, but it starts bringing up a childhood memory of him.
Here we go. You're hacking away at a femur.
All right, you can see my role in this whole thing. And don't say it. I know you're thinking, yeah, I'm seeing a common theme here. Every trip, he's sitting in the lawn chair sipping bourbon while somebody's doing work cutting firewood.
Do what you're good at.
Yeah, okay, I get it. Fair. That's a fair assessment.
Johnny was like in a setting like this, like foggy little woods.
The overfilled lake coming up to the campsite.
With the swamp monster coming out of the woods, and they were trying to get away from these like swamp things, sort of things. That goes back to like the 60s. They don't make cartoons like that anymore. That was like classic cartoon genre. Johnny Quest. Remember, go look for it, man. It was awesome.
Thanks, Chris.
Setting. Frogs and the crickets and everything in the background. The soundtrack was just like us.
Perfect. Thank you. So so David starts talking about Johnny Quest and the swamp thing, and it's like all of a sudden now it's like your childhood starts coming out in all these crazy stories, right? We have one of the best storytellers that I've happened to come across, and I'm new to his channel, and I'll be the first to admit it, but I tell you what, in the last month that I've been watching it, it is spectacular. So if we could bring in Mr. Josh Nanocchio from What Lurks Beneath. Hey, welcome, Josh.
Man.
Hey, how's it going?
So, first thing I got to mention, okay, dude, your beard game is on point.
It's on point.
Like,
appreciate that.
For real. It's like, so you look like we know a lot of AT through hikers and people that your beard is like far superior than any of theirs. Like, I almost have to ask you, are you big into the outdoors? Do you like the outdoors, or what's your history with that? Because I almost feel like there's something there.
Contrary to all the content that I create, I actually do really enjoy the outdoors. I need to get out hiking more, but something I really enjoy doing, at least that I really want to get into, is kayaking and just exploring more, and not just casual exploring or going on a hiking trail, but I'm really into doing those 5, 7, 10-mile hikes, like the really intensive loops with the switchbacks and the inclines. And Like I told you guys before, there's just something about being outdoors and just in nature. It just does something to your psyche. It's like you're at home. Yeah, for sure.
I agree. And I think that's kind of like all of us have that same common denominator. It's like anybody, even if you've never been out in the backcountry before, the second that you go out there, there's this grand mystique. It's like, just wandering in the woods, or you feel like, in this novice environment or whatever. But do you think that might be the attraction to some of these topics that you talk about on your channel? Like maybe just wondering about, is there a Bigfoot? What's the novelty in that? It's like, it's natural, it's primal.
I'm sorry, elaborate on your question more.
So, like, do you think there's a kind of a correspondence between the novelty of being outdoors and the fact of what's the mystery behind Bigfoot or Dogman, or the weirdness behind it? Do you think that's the allure to it? Why it's such a popular topic?
Yeah, I mean, if you think Bigfoot has been popularized for what, like nearly 50, 60 years now. So there's that, but there is some sort of a mystique just with the forest in general. I mean, think about it. In the United States alone, there's millions of acres, and a lot of it is just unexplored. You think in some of these places, it's like 40, 50, 60, 100 miles as the crow flies into woods that, there aren't really any trails. If there are, it's like, game trails and just things like that. My father-in-law used to be a guide back in the 80s, and he guided in this place called the Chamberlain Basin in, I think it's like south central Idaho. It's above Boise. And that place is like, 40, 50 miles away from like the nearest town. So like, when you go in there, you're in there.
Yeah.
And, he never had any experiences, like of stuff that I talk about, but, he would be, like on his pack mule and stuff at night going on these trails. And he's like, it's just different, when you're that far out away from civilization by yourself, it definitely can play tricks on you. And so anyway, to answer your question, yeah, I definitely believe that there's a certain mystique about the woods that does bring an interest in this topic that, we like to call cryptozoology, or just, the paranormal.
Yeah. Awesome. So what kind of led you into doing a lot of these topics in your channel? I'm just kind of curious, like, how did you originally get into this?
Yeah. So growing up, I've always had an interest in, I don't want to just say cryptids, but, Bigfoot was interesting to me, but I don't really recall watching a lot of it. Like, I didn't watch a lot of like Bigfoot related shows or anything like that. But I remember when I was younger, probably about 12, there's this show I used to watch, and it was where they would take people, like families, and drop them off at these extremely, haunted places, and they'd have to stay overnight. I wish I could remember the show. I think it was like on like Sci-Fi Channel or something. I'm sure somebody out there knows what I'm talking about. But then like fast forward to like, 2012, and you started to have more shows, so, like Paranormal Witness and all that sort of thing. And that was definitely a lot more interesting to me. Then, 2014, 2013, that around that time, you had like Finding Bigfoot come out. And it was right around there that I learned of something called the Dogman. I was like, whoa, like, what is this? Like, this is wild. And so again, fast forward again to like 2018, and I actually start my channel, and it was just, I was just doing it for fun. And I just started narrating stories because I had like this, amateur background and like narrating and like just recording. So I'm like, why not? Well, it actually grew into something, did that for a few years. And finally I was like, okay, like I have some gear. I have a camera. At this time, this was like 2022, the beginning of, or maybe somewhere around there. Over like that last year and a half, I had like tried to do other stuff on YouTube, like with a camera. So I felt comfortable enough in front of a camera. So I'm like, all right, let's make it happen. And, here we are. But, topics like the things that I talk about, missing persons, cryptids, just, I don't even want to say like paranormal, but just strange things, right? Unsolved mysteries, but like with a kind of more supernatural angle. That's always been super fascinating to me. And so I'm like, everyone's doing true crime. And I'm like, I don't care how ridiculous some of this stuff is. It's fascinating. And so, you know, my whole approach is like, look, here's the information. I don't care if it's presented as truth. Here's the information. You decide what to believe. And that's why I always try to end it with, you know, like, you know, it does remain a mystery, or it is unsolved because you don't know. And so, yeah.
I have a question. So I haven't been able to totally go through your all your videos. Have you done one on the I can't remember the name, that Russian pass where the 9 hikers,
the Dyatlov Pass? Yes.
Yeah. And it seemed like recently I heard that they actually solved that mystery.
Oh, did they?
I think so, but I have to check that again. But that one always fascinated me because the 9 hikers were without clothes, and the tents were cut from the inside instead of the outside. Nobody really understood what happened to them. That one's always been fascinating to me.
Yeah. I think I did a video on that. I want to say it was like last fall. And I remember the majority of it, or I should say the gist of it. And obviously it's a really strange case, if not one of the strangest coming out of that whole area. I think the gist of it was that they were like, oh, you know, it's like testing, but there was a lot of odd things about that case, and just kind of how weird the military there's new evidence. Okay.
Yeah, new evidence.
Well, I haven't really kept up on it, but they're just really strange circumstances. Now, if anyone's familiar with the area, right, you know, you go a little bit to the southwest. If my geography is correct, you know, you have the Black Sea, and you know, the Crimean Peninsula and all those things. Well, that area, there's a lot of strange stuff. And so specifically, there are quite a few strange cases with like USSR divers, like encountering bizarre things like you would expect out of like a sci-fi novel. Now, these aren't fictitious tales that somebody wrote up. There's like multiple redacted reports from the, you know, Russian government from like the 1980s and 90s that have been like, you know, that have kind of circulated and, you know, surfaced in some parts. The first batch of them I kind of came across was from a website called Mysterious Universe. You guys,
I know that
more
one.
than welcome to check that out. Yeah. A famous researcher by the name of Albert Rosales. He has a humanoid encounters database. I think he had touched upon some of them, and I'm not going to go into each one, but one in particular was a diver by the name of Nikolay, and he was diving in this area, and I don't remember exactly how far. It wasn't super deep down, but he came across this like large gray capsule looking thing, and he thought it was like a block of cement or something. And so he actually goes back on shore, gets his pneumatic drill, goes down there, and he's like trying to, in his mind, I think he was thinking that there was like something in there like worth like treasure wise. I think he had believed that it was like an old bomb from like World War II that he was going to sell for parts. Wow. I don't remember the exact details, but he had money on his mind. And so he's drilling into this thing, and he's wondering why it's like really tough. And he finally gets in a bit, and also like this kind of like this black smog kind of just pours out. And he's like, what the? And so he kind of keeps going a little bit more. And long story short, it was like this casing, and inside was like this like white being with like black eyes, and apparently like it reached out with like clawed hands and like try to like grab at him. And so, you know, he like freaked out, went back to shore. Wow. And so anyway, yeah, that's kind of like the story in a nutshell, but it's just, you know, it's really wild. There was other stories in particular about a group of divers who had went down in the same area in the Black Sea. And one of these beings like floated up to this diver and held out this like device to him or something. All I know is that within like 3 seconds, the pressure that emitted from it blew him up out of the water. And obviously, you know, if you accelerate that fast, it'll kill you because the nitrogen in his blood. I want to say he ascended like over like 90 feet in like a matter of seconds. So I mean, it either killed him or like critically injured him. But again, these are just like brief little snippets. You guys can find the stories. They're not hard to find. You can kind of just Google SSR divers, Black Sea, and that there's So anyway, that whole area, there's just a lot of weird stuff, and there's a lot of things out of Eastern Europe that like don't really get a lot of publicity here, especially just in like the media and stuff. So they're kind of just like buried. But yeah, so
That's
Very
crazy.
cool.
wild. Yeah.
Somebody wants to say hi here. So
What's up, Philly?
it must be a fan of your channel there. Awesome.
I guess so. I don't know you, Philly, but nice to meet you.
Very cool. Were you going to ask something, Brian? I before Chris really cut you off.
kind of backtrack, but like Josh was saying, it's like you have to take these stories for what they are. There's the information, and it's kind of at the end what I like about them. It's kind of up to you. Is it truth and reality, or is it just somebody's imagination that ran wild? Because some of these stories, they can be really far out there, and some of them can be like, yeah, that could be this or that and the other, but that's what I like about them. They're mostly unsolved mysteries, and it's kind of left up to you to figure out like what you think of it or what you believe.
Well, here's the crazy thing too, and this kind of leads into my next question. You find some really, really cool guests. I mean, really cool guests. In the fact of the details that they remember, in the way that they tell their stories with such conviction. I think it's your sub channel on what Lurks Beneath podcast. You have like that secondary channel. There's a guy on there, and actually, Chris, I actually have a clip on it. It's number 4 that Roy is a Stubblefield.
Yes, sir.
So that has to be one of my favorite ones. I remember thinking, I'm like looking at this, and it's like a 3-hour interview that you did, which was phenomenal. You let him tell a story and just you guided it at the right. It was perfect. I remember looking at this 3-hour thing, and I'm like, you know what? I got these chores to do, and I'll start it, get as far as I can, and then I'll go do something else. I'll finish it later. I never left. I stayed on that thing until it was done. I got nothing accomplished that day. It was. But Chris, did you play that? Intro?
Roy Stubblefield.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just the first 37 seconds.
That's a effing hand. That ain't no paw. That's a hand. Just tell me what drug you gave my father that cost me a father when I was a kid. I'm leaving. I don't even know where the hell I'm running, but I'm running. I'm going to take you from your kids like you took my dad from me. This is a monster. So that thing did, in fact, kill him. She just took a long time doing it. Okay. But this calm voice in my head said, okay, I'm looking at a werewolf.
Oh.
Yeah.
There it is, folks.
Dude,
there it is.
That was one of the most captivating stories I've ever heard. It was phenomenal. And can you elaborate a little bit on how you found this guy and how it worked out?
Yeah. So during that time, this was back in that interview and the one I shot before that with Ben Regal. That was actually shot back in December of 2023. And during that time, I had this mission where I wanted to reach out to all the people I could from the show These Woods Are Haunted and give them a chance to like tell their story. And come to find out in this process of like reaching out to these people, a lot of their stories were unfortunately like very misconstrued or like told out of order, or there were things injected in there that weren't exactly, they were so far different from like what was actually told that it wasn't even like the right story. And so, I always say like that there's things in storytelling where, you can embellish on certain things or like inject details that like move the story along. But if you're just full on like fabricating, like, well, that actually never happened, and like that's not even the story, then it's like, what are you doing? So I wanted him to come on and kind of get his opportunity to speak out. I think I just reached out to these people on Facebook. It was very basic. It took a little bit of a PI work, but I found probably like maybe like 3 or 4, and I'd found some others that just never reached back out. And there's one gentleman who's like, I just I've no desire to like talk about it, but anyway. So yeah, shot the one with him, did the one with him and Ben, and Roy's was heavy. And I think for me, it wasn't so much what he experienced, but it was the fact with Herman. And I cut it out. Him and I had quite a bit of back and forth, and I just that's cut out of the final because to me it didn't move the story along, and I really wanted to keep the focus on the guest and his experience. And so I remember when he was telling the bit about Herman, and I'm sorry I'm going to spoil it here if you haven't watched it. But when he basically told me that Herman had died, I like was choked up and like partially crying. I was like what we're talking, because I was just like. It was just so heavy in the fact that like, he was taken, that he had a 7-year-old son, who, and he died. It's like, I'm a dad too. So I was like, oh my gosh, like that just, it tore me up. But it was the fact that this guy was so traumatized, that he was never the same. And, I get the whole story is like interesting because it's about like the shapeshift and the werewolf, but for me, like, I don't know, I just really latched on to like the tragedy of Herman and like how he was just gone. And so for me, that was probably like the most just like, oh my gosh, part of the story. Now, of course, like everything else that happens in that story is also very interesting in regards to the girl, what he saw and experienced. And he truly believes, and I believe that she probably like was dealing in black magic or something, and when we don't know, but it's very fascinating. It seems to be that way. So I hope that answered your question.
No, it did. It did.
Great.
And I think that's what I'm getting at too. It's like you could tell that the details that he's talking about in the heartfelt conversation he's having, that's why you believe him. It has, I don't care what he said. When you're telling something with that conviction, something happened, and then the fact of the, which I really don't want to spoil the story at the end that he talks about what happens after Herman's death and his kid. But the details and the fact of what happened with that, I mean, that kind of got me as well too. Like when Herman's son called him and said, "What did you do to my dad?" And, I'm with you. I'm like, oh my gosh, that literally just crushes your soul as a dad. So
it tore me up.
But the fact that he's telling this story and he's talking about, he remembers that conversation on the basketball court as they're walking to the liquor store, and Herman says, "Yeah, I'm going to be a dad," and he remembers the detail of the earring, which go listen to this video. It is phenomenal. It's one of the best stories I've ever heard. So, but I just, the PI work that you do to find these people, is it more challenging or is it easier than what it seems? Because to me, it's like
easier.
It's nothing fancy at all. It's literally like I get on Facebook and like I try to find their name and I just like go through profiles that look like them and I reach out.
But I mean, even finding the stories for these things, I'd never even heard of Roy until your video, and it's like, how's this story not known by everybody? So just finding some of these stories, it's like, how do you do that?
So I think for those in particular, I had gone through like literally every single episode of that show. And like every time they'd have a guest, I try to, unfortunately, there were many that they didn't say their last name. So I kind of had to like find like, okay, like, is there a person that looks like them that lives in this area? And, some it took me a while to find, but for the most part, I just had to hope that it showed their name or their full name. And then I would just go on Facebook and search. And of course, if they don't have a Facebook, then I'm not going to like scour all over a Google form. I'm just like, well, oh, well.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So no, let me ask you this. Okay. Yeah. So out of all the cryptid stories, if you have to say the one, whether it's Bigfoot or Skinwalkers, all of them that are out there, what one to you is, if you could say this is the one that is truly real, which one to you would stick out in your mind the most?
Two off the top of my head. Okay. So everyone knows Matt Emsh's story. And if you haven't, I mean, what are you doing? Like, it is probably one of the most terrifying stories, true stories. I'm actually good friends with Matt. And actually, I'm going to segue a little bit here and I'll get back to the other story.
Sure.
One reason why I believe Matt, is that him and I actually hit it off. We became friends like way before the interview happened. So I was at a paranormal conference. He met me. Apparently he was a fan of my show. I didn't know the guy. We just hung out. And, you know, we hit it off, and, you know, I was like, hey, let's hang out sometime. And during us hanging out and kind of just having a good time, I'm trying to remember what happened after that. It ended. And then I think we kept contact. Okay, that's right. That was when I did the first interview. And I did the first interview with a friend of mine named Alan Clark, who's a famous photographer down in Nashville. Because he's like, hey, man, he's like, you know, we should like do a little like interview together. And he's like, you know, we can kind of promote this like photography thing we're doing. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And so, you know, he showed some ghost photos and that got some traction. And then Matt reached out to me. He's like, hey, man, he's like, I know it's been a few weeks, but I'm like, you know, do you want me to tell you my Dogman story? He's like, we could do it in an interview. And I'm like, I didn't know you had a story. I was like, sure. And, you know, looking back, you think I would have like got on YouTube and like saw if he had told the story. No, I was like, all right, let's just go into this. And so when we filmed it, I had no idea what to expect. You know, I'd never heard it. I didn't know what he was going to tell me. You know, he could have just like, you know, BS'd me for 45 minutes, but then he just lays out, you know, what he laid out in the interview. And so everything you see is 100% a genuine reaction from me. And I will say this, if he's acting, give the man an Oscar. Right. Yeah. An incredible performance. So, absolutely. But again, everybody knows that story. I'm not going to rehash it. If you want to go see it, it's the main video on my channel. I really recommend watching if you haven't. And then the other one that I think is equally potent. Actually, there's another one off the top of my head too. It's just not as terrifying. Is Fred Rolling? Forgive me if I'm pronouncing his last name wrong. He is either part native or full native up in Alaska. Oh my gosh, he had this terrifying experience with these wild hairy men that literally, I don't want to spoil it, but they basically, I mean, these were violent, like they were going to eat them. Oh. And I just remember the one part of it, you know, it like stuck its face up in the glass and looked at both of them, and they gave them the expression that like, you're food, and it grinned at them. Oh, I'm getting a chill because I'm not going to tell the story. Just go to YouTube, look for Fred Ruling. His last name is Ruehling, I believe. Okay. And it's an incredible story. The other one that I thought was really interesting that I believe is a guy by the name of Ernie Davio. And his experience took place in, was it Vermont? I don't know. I'm not really familiar with like the geography of, you know, the northern East Coast, but it was around there. And long story short, he had gone in this area and was like hunting. He was a younger man. I want to say he was probably closer to my age, you know, like in his you know, mid to young 30s. And he's like looking out and he sees this like hairy thing behind a tree, and like it double takes. It sees him too, and him and this thing are both shocked. And before this, you know, he was like, yeah, Bigfoot, like, okay. And so this isn't just like, oh, I done saw Bigfoot. No, he's like, holy crap, like this is like this thing. And it looks at him, and we know what it does next. It doesn't run away. It doesn't growl at him. It actually like starts to walk toward him. And then it does this. It points to him and it points back at him. And then it does this with his hands because he has his gun out. And he's like, yeah. And Ernie told me, he's like, the gist I got was that it was saying we're equal. Because it didn't point at itself first. It did him, and you know, then it did this as it approached him, and it got within, I want to say within a couple yards of Ernie, and it didn't talk to him, but it started doing hand gestures to him, like, you know, trying to find out like how did you get here? Like, I didn't see you, you know. And the gist is that these things were actually hunting the same deer that Ernie was, and Ernie got the and these things were hunting for food. And
get yours, man. Have at it.
Yeah. He said that this thing was doing hand signals to him much the same way an adult would like try to communicate with a toddler. Mm-hmm. And just being this close, I mean, he talked about all the details of the face. And in fact, if you guys go on Google and you type in Sibylla Irwin, who did an amazing, she's an artist who creates these incredible eyewitness sketches. She works with witnesses, and they spend months nailing every little detail to the T of what they experienced. So if you look up her work, you can see it. In fact, you might be able to pull it up right now if you can. If one of you guys goes to Google and you
Chris
type in Ernie,
What's the,
yeah.
How do you spell the?
Which one? Sevilla Irwin. Yeah, and then type in Ernie. Davio is DAV. And I think it's EIAOU. I could be wrong on that, but it's close. Anyway, the Bigfoot he saw had like ice blue eyes, I think like a husky. He said it had a young complexion, so it was probably in its 20s. You know, like he just told me all these details, and it was just like, wow. And then after it kind of got done, you know, hand gesturing to him, it went over to this other one behind the bush, and it started like, you know, doing what they describe as samurai chattering, like, you know, and it was like angry, like, you know, and then it like looked over at Ernie, and the other one did like this too. And so it was probably saying something like, you're supposed to be scanning the perimeter. How did you let a human go through? Like, what are you doing? Yeah. And so it's really wild. And, you know, after that, like Ernie was obviously changed. And so there is another story he had told me of a gentleman. I don't remember the details of it, but long story short, years later, another guy was driving through that same area, and it sounds like he saw the same one that Ernie did, you know, years ago, because this was like back in the 80s, I believe. So again, that was just another really incredible story off the top of my head. But yeah, I would say those three like just really, really stick out to me.
So Bigfoot is probably, I'm guessing Bigfoot's probably one of the two that you would believe would be real out of all of them. If you only said one of them were real, you said you might have two. So what would be the second?
Stories.
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
just like individual beings. Like if you said, you know, which individual cryptid would be real out of all of them? What do you think would be the most believable to say that this one's real?
Well, the first thing I would say is that unfortunately the idea of believable is a construct that has been pushed by society for us to believe, you know, what we want to be told and we want to believe. So I have to like take that and set that aside. So now that that's over here, now to be like, okay, well, to think logically and critically doesn't always apply in this subject either, because that's dealing with, you know, the third dimension, things we could touch, see, smell, senses, things that make logical sense. So I have to put that over to the side. So what am I left with? Then you get the people who are like, I saw Jesus in my pancake syrup. So I'm like, okay, well, hold on. So, okay, keep him over here, right? Because there are those people. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to be cynical, but I'm also going to be open-minded. I'm going to be jaded, but I'm still going to listen. So I'm like, okay. And then I start to look, and I start to look, and I start to look. And what I come across is just a myriad of report after story after report, all. And of course, I'm sure there's lies and BS buried in these piles, of course, but of just, I don't want to just chalk it down to just an encounter or like, you know, an event, but all these people are describing similar behavioral patterns, similar physical attributes, behavior. I already said behaviors. Behaviors. I'm drawing a blank right now, but a lot of similarities between cases of, say, like, I guess we'll just say Bigfoot and Dogman, right? Skinwalker and all that other stuff. Like that's a whole other thing, which we can get to. And you know, none of them are so fantastical that I'm like, oh, please. For example, like, you know, none of them are like, yeah, and it came up to my door and it knocked on my door and it gave me its phone number, man. Like it wanted to date my sister, bro. Like nothing like that, right? It all feels, well, with Dogman specifically, a lot of it feels like very demonic, very predatory, very 100%. Terrifying. With Bigfoot, you know, it can be either or. I've read and heard stories where it was benign and almost like protective. There's many that were neutral, and then there's many that were very violent, aggressive. For example, like Joe's story, you know, like where they could have died. There's another story that comes to mind. It's actually in my book, where a gentleman had got a hunt on some private land in Florida. They rented a oh my gosh, not a hunting trailer, but just like a little RV. And, these things basically came in and started beating the crap out of their vehicle. And, long story short, they had to get out of there because they were going to be turned into baloney. So, yeah. So anyway, again, you kind of just go over all these stories. You're like, wow, there's a stupid amount of similarities between these. And then to me, the real kicker is like, all right, like, what do the natives have to say about this stuff? So you start listening to like, native tales and legends and like hearing their stories. And again, there's just a lot more. But to me, I think one of the bigger things with that is, and I'll never forget this when I spoke, that there's a couple of native guys that I spoke to years ago, and they were, I believe, from the Warm Springs tribe in Oregon, either that or from the Yakima tribe up in Washington. Either way, I had asked them about it. I was like, what do you guys think about like the whole Bigfoot thing? And to them, it's just so funny because to them it was so like matter of fact, like a bear. They're like, oh yeah, like we have lots of stories. Like there's just certain places you don't go. They weren't like, oh, it's just, yeah. They also weren't like, oh yeah, right, that doesn't exist. It was just like, oh yeah, there's just certain, to them as well. It seems to be like they're a race of beings, of people. They're not animals. They're not apes. So I don't know. It's really interesting. And so anyway, as I'm kind of going through all this, you read all these stories, you hear all these reports, you hear all these accounts, and what do you do with this information, right? Because it's not accepted by media and the public. It's not, there's no bones, there's no bodies, there's none of that. So it's like, okay, what do you do with this information? And it's a strange place to be in. And I'm not sure why, but it seems to be like there's some sort of active, dare I say the word, cover up to this information. And I'm not exactly sure why. I really don't like it's meant to be that the entire Bigfoot phenomenon is supposed to be like some like, oh, a hoax. You're made to be crazy. Now, the first thing I've suspected is, let's say they went out and, that they announced that, these things were real. Can you imagine the complete chaos that would come? First off, the complete distrust in the government that would follow. You guys knew about this the whole time and you lied to us. Secondly, you would have many people up in arms going out in the woods with guns, shooting, trying to hunt and kill these things. And thirdly, you would have a massive revenue loss. Now, I don't know for the people out here watching this, but federally, they bring in something like $30+ million of revenue a year from like state parks, national parks. So I'm like, imagine the revenue dip from just families who like to go out, annually, or every few months with their families. They ain't going to go anymore. So, I mean, those three things to me are probably the most, are probably the top. And I'm sure there's other reasons that are probably more nefarious, but there's another story that I think you guys might enjoy. Now, I've heard some things about it that it's not true, but I've spoken to Joe Barger. That's his name, Joe Barger, myself. I want to believe that his story is true, so I'm going to give him the benefit of a doubt. And long story short is that he was in the Manistee National Forest. This was years ago. And and he was going up an incline in a big diesel rig, I believe. And one of these things, you know the story. So long story short, he shot and killed one of these things, and he was, I don't want to say he was arrested, but he was detained for however many hours, and they basically told him, you killed one of our assets. So it's like, what the hell are you talking about? Who are you? Because they basically said this is an issue of national security. You killed one of our assets. What are you doing, dude? And they basically told me, if you don't stop talking about this, we can, it'd be a shame if you were to fail your piss test. So he's like, whoa.
That's
Yeah.
So
he was a truck driver, right?
Yeah, at the time. Yeah. And so he's like, oh my gosh. And so again, I want to believe Joe in the goodness of my heart. I want to believe Joe. I've heard things that it's not true. I don't know. But assuming it is, again, we're kind of just back to square one where it's like, okay, we've set this stuff to the side, like we talked about. We have all these accounts, thousands, hundreds of accounts. But at the same time, you have, rational, normal people who are like, that stuff's not true. It's fiction. It's creepypasta. So then what do you do with it? this is where I'm at. I take the Mulder from X-Files approach. I want to believe.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen one. I haven't experienced it. But then, like I've told you guys and told all of you out there listening, I have people that I talk to that's off camera, off the show, and they are so sincere in telling me their stories. Like you can see them reliving
100%.
the trauma, and they get choked up and they have to pause, and you could tell they're reliving the moment. And I'm thinking to myself, how do you fake that?
Yeah.
Well, there's just no way. So I'm like, and I hate the approach that people take where they're like, well, I believe he believes that he saw that. Like, that's, I don't subscribe to that. If it was one person, yeah, but there's just too many.
To play devil's advocate on that too, it's like, some people just want to dismiss it, like, oh, I don't believe in Bigfoot. You're crazy. Your imagination's running, right? And then, another thing I've thought of and I've heard too is like, in today's time and age, there's so many people out hunting. I grew up hunting.
Yes.
Never seen anything. There's so many trail cameras out.
You spend a lot of time in LBL too, right?
And I grew up hunting in the Land Between the Lakes. Everybody has one of these, a cell phone with them. Why didn't they get a good picture or a video? Yeah, there's so many things too that can just.
I have an answer to that, by the way, and it's in this comment right here.
Bigfoot shy. Yeah.
And I also want to acknowledge we had
Derwin off the rails. I love that guy.
Super chat. We've never gotten one before.
Look at that guy
talking about it doing some chemical.
That's Derwin right there.
Yeah, that's him. We love him.
And we also have a question, by the way, for Josh. What's your favorite Canadian story?
Hi, Sherry. My favorite Canadian story. I could do what everybody else does, and it's the Wendigo, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any stories that immediately pop in my head, but I do know that there are some weird things that happen up north. Obviously, there's like Dogman. There's plenty of Bigfoot stories. UAPs, all that stuff, but none that just pop right out at me. I'm sorry.
But are the Dogmen up there very polite?
Yes.
Okay, good.
They court you, actually.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So getting to Dogman, I really want to touch base on that one because that's my favorite one, right?
Mm-hmm. Likewise.
And I don't know my experiences. I know I've had weird experiences. And Brian, let me bring this up to you. Out of all the hikers that are out there, everyone's had some type of experience, right? It's just a matter of sometimes if you're dismissing it to a bobcat or a fox or a turkey falling out of a tree, whatever it is.
Sure.
Sometimes you just go ahead.
I was gonna say you hear stuff and you hear something, you don't see it. What was that kind of thing? I think you spend enough time in the woods, you're gonna hear something that's like, wow, that's a weird noise. What the heck was that? First time I ever heard a fox crying. I have it on video, and I had to ask people like, what the hell was this? Like, obviously it's an animal, but it sounded like some lady was over in a holler screaming or something, So you hear stuff, and it's easy. Your imagination could run wild, what it is. But you talk to enough people, it's been out in the woods enough. Everybody's got some kind of experience.
Now, Dogman, I've never heard of, like I said, in the very beginning of this until a couple years ago. But since then, I did not realize how many places have had sightings and how many places. It's I don't know. Do you think it's almost more than a Bigfoot at this point? Or I mean, it just seems like every state has like the beast of Michigan, the beast of Illinois, the beast of Indiana. I mean, they're everywhere. So what's your opinion on that?
Well, Dogman has the idea behind it has kind of really exploded and been popularized, especially in the last 10 years. And so what I think has happened is you're having a lot more people now that they know that's a thing. They're kind of coming forward with their own experience, things that they've had happen to them, in the 90s, 80s, 70s, back beyond. Could you think before, if you're in the 80s or 90s and you saw one of these things, I wouldn't tell a soul. They're gonna think I'm crazy.
Exactly.
Bigfoot's one thing, but it's like I saw a bipedal wolf. I'm like, I can't. No one's gonna believe me. And unfortunately, there's many who've gone to the grave with their experience. Sadly, but to answer your question, I do feel like there is a lot of these things out there, specifically in the Midwest and the East Coast, and a lot of the reason for that is due to the let me think here, or thinking what I want to say. Not just the mountain ranges, but like the heavy forestry. I mean, if you look at, say, like Google Earth, you could see from pretty much like, the Midwest on, it's just like green, like just thick. And you got the Appalachian Mountains, you got the Ozarks. I mean, it's just like, gosh, it's just so much just thick. So years ago, I went to Nashville for the first time, and I'm in the Pacific Northwest, right? So, you think of like Bigfoot woods, like the tall fir trees, kind of like, more spaced out woods, like, oh, that's Oregon, Washington woods. But you go down to like Tennessee, and it's just thick, like a jungle. I remember we were in Nashville, and I remember just looking out in the hills, and it was just so dense. I'm like, this is like a jungle out here.
Oh,
it's a totally different kind of woods. And I thought to myself, when we were first coming over here, like, we were having like to hack our way through this stuff to even get to civilization. And it's like, so there's a lot of areas where these things can, thrive and survive. And I mean, there's so many different ways I can talk about this. I mean, so I don't know if you want me to touch upon certain stuff, but I guess there's one thing in particular where there have been people who had been like killed from what they deem as wild dog attacks. They're like, well, we don't know what it is. But these people are like mauled, ripped apart. I mean, torn to shreds. So it's like, okay, well, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying one way or the other, but it is interesting. Do you think Dogman is the same as a werewolf? No. So from what I've gathered, Dogman is basically its own thing. A Dogman is just this bipedal wolf cryptid. Now, even though, they look the same, or they look almost the same, they are different. A werewolf is kind of like a skinwalker, where it would imply that there's shape-shifting involved, right, through black magic or some sort of like blood sacrifice, right? That's more of like an occult thing. But yeah, Dogman, that's why it's so like. And then you have the other sect of this thing where it's like, people believe it's like a government bioweapon. And I don't know if there's both or what. There's a lady I spoke to. I probably won't name her name, but she was telling me that she had a chance to speak with a gentleman who's unfortunately deceased. He was killed, actually. And he came from a program that was ran by I don't know if he ever gave a branch, but anyway, he got in contact with her, and he started telling her all this stuff. And she's like, why are you telling me this stuff? And he basically told her, I'm like me and this other person, are they the one left from this group? They've killed us all. I might as well tell somebody. And it was like 4 years later, he had a stroke, and he died. And his wife called her and was like, they finally got him. He's dead. Wow. And long story short, there apparently was like some sort of stuff going on in South America where they had a lab, and I guess these things like broke out. They were basically creating bioweapons, and that this thing broke out. It literally sounds like it's like the plot of a movie. Like, as I'm like, tell me this. I was like, what? This is like nuts. Like, what? And apparently it was like murdering a lot of people in some of these like villages. And if you think like in parts of South America, like it is as rural can get, I mean, like if an entire village is like mutilated, and you're not going to hear about it here, it won't even, you won't even know. And anyway, so I guess they had a team come in and like take these things out. And so it's just like, so anyway, I've heard that it's like, a weapon, that other people have said things along the lines that, they've always been here. You talk to like certain tribes and stuff, and they're like, yeah, specifically like the Chickasaw and the Choctaw. They have a lot of stories about the hairy men and these dog things warring with each other because the natives were their food.
Oh,
And so, yeah. And so it's like, what is it then? I don't know. I can only tell you what I've come across. So I'm like, I don't know.
NADP has grown a lot and less. We do have one other question here. Have you
Yeah.
ever regretted not pushing harder on anyone's story?
ooh, great question.
That is a good question. When you say not pushing harder, do you mean like elaborate
trying to get them to elaborate, maybe is what they mean.
Well, when I talk to people, whether it's through phone or whether it's through, interview, my approach is I let them tell their entire story from start to finish. And as they're telling it, I often, we'll have like a, notebook and and I'm just like writing things down, as they're telling me. And then when we get to the end and they're like, okay, that's my experience. Then I start going back and I'm like, oh, you during the thing, you said X, Y, and Z. Can you elaborate on that? Why did this happen here? How old again were you? Okay. And I'm not necessarily just looking for inconsistencies, but I'm looking for them to elaborate more and see if there's anything that doesn't exactly add up. And it also gives them a chance to be like, oh, I didn't elaborate. Here's how, Y connects to Z. And you're like, oh, okay, I see. That makes sense. But an email, that's tough because there's been many times that I've told people's stories that were sent through like Messenger or email. And, sometimes people aren't the greatest at conveying their experience through like written word. And it's either like a jumbled up mess that I have to kind of like sift through and add grammar to and like, or they're like, hey, I'm pumping and dumping. Here's my experience, do with it what you will. And I'm like, hey, like, what year did this happen? Just crickets. Like, okay. So, but I don't ever like take like an account that was sent to me that's like 2 paragraphs. Like I really only try to like work with something that has meat to it. Like I'm not going to tell a 3-minute story, like, oh, I drove here and I saw a dogman and I was scared. Like, oh, okay, that's great. Like what am I going to do with this? Like, that sucks, man. But yeah, so I guess hopefully it answers that.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, fantastic.
I got a question or a comment, however you want to take it. So
yeah,
Jeremy and I were talking earlier about Dogman, LBL. He spent a lot of time down there. I grew up in Kentucky and went to Lane Between Lakes a lot, deer hunting and stuff, been all over that. And I mean, that's late 80s, early 90s when I was a teenager.
Yep.
And, back then we were missing one thing that we have now. That's the internet, all this great source of information and stories and that. But I can remember my stepdad and his buddy that were taking me hunting. They would give me grief. Oh, don't run into Dogman,
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, what's that? And I figured at the time, I'd never heard of it because we don't have the internet. And I figured, oh, they're just trying to scare me. But I've never seen anything down there. But I also wonder now with all the technology, not only internet, but AI coming in, I wonder if we're going to start seeing, and what do you think about seeing reports where people like, I have this picture and it could be an AI generated image now. You think we will start seeing stuff like that?
Yeah, I work a lot with a lot of these tools, and I'm very much involved in that space just because I'm really fascinated with technology and things like that. And I tell people, I'm like, you can't trust video and images at all. So unless somebody flat out comes out and says, hey, look at this picture, this is actually what I photographed, I wouldn't. It's just really hard. And even now, I know a huge complaint, of course, is that a lot of the evidence people have is like really bad quality. Well, even if it's really good quality now, you just can't trust it. I mean, to be as specific as possible, Midjourney, a very famous text to image model that's out now, you could replicate, iPhone photography. All you have to say is, like picture of a werewolf in the woods taken with an iPhone posted to Reddit. Like you can't tell the difference. Or taken with a DSLR. I mean, so it's, and then Google unveiled Veo 3, which is insane. It can't do like CCTV footage that great yet, but you can definitely fake a lot of like interview footage and things like that. So I mean, you can't even if you were to flat out say like, I got a government official to like, blow the whistle on like reptilians, and it shows that I'm serious. Like I tell people, I'm like, listen, unless somebody flat out says like, look, this is what it is. I'm showing you this. You just can't. And unfortunately,
any video under 9 seconds is suspect. Let's put it that way.
Not even. Because you could extend it now in the Google Flow. You can like, make it even more. And I would say within the next 6 months, you probably won't even be able to really differentiate. I've seen other videos that people created with Veo where it's like, a TikTok in their car or, and it's just like, wow. And it still kind of has an uncanny valley look to it where like, it's like 90% there. But I mean, like, I don't know if you guys have seen the test where it's like Will Smith eating spaghetti and you look 2 years ago and it was terrible. And now it's like,
I've seen that.
And the thing with AI is it's improving exponentially. Human brains, we can't comprehend exponential. We can definitely comprehend linear, but that's all we can think. So we're like, it'll be a few years. No, it won't. Like it's going
a few months.
Yeah. And so by the end of this year, I really don't even think you'll be able to trust any video or audio. And that includes not just like proof, but even like say like Trump giving a speech that he's going to like imprison everyone who's like, not white. It's like you won't be able to trust it. It's going to be terrible. Yeah. And I would be lying if I said I wasn't, terrified for what it's going to do. You just won't be able to trust anything. And,
I mean, because that's one of the things you get all these people's experiences and stories, and the one thing they've always lacked is as humans, we want to see the visual proof, right? Where's the pictures? Where's the videos? And now we have the technology to just like, well, here it is, and make it up. So I just wonder what your thoughts were. Like I said, are we going to start seeing that now?
Oh yeah.
I mean, you probably will, but something else I found out, and this is different than the whole AI thing, is that at the end of the day, you could have the best proof in the world, and the people who want to believe will believe, and the people who don't want to believe won't believe. It doesn't matter how clear of a picture you got. You know what I mean? Because it's just how it is. It's just how we are. It's how we're programmed. It's just a human condition. I think for some people, having that kind of proof, it scares people. They don't want to believe that. But, if you do want to believe, you don't need a picture to be convinced. So,
True.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and even sometimes like in Roy's scenario, he almost had to like talk himself into what he was seeing, right? It's like, I'm really looking at this. I'm really looking at a bipedal wolf standing in front of me. I mean, I've had an experience where it's like, I think I've told the story before where I went out to Red River Gorge, and when I go there, it's so busy on trail. I always go off trail just to escape the people. And usually what I try to do is go in late the night before, went up this chute, and Brian, this will sound familiar, but I was going up Bison Way Trail, hit a left and started going up towards the arch, Adena Arch. And there's a little flat spot at about 1 a.m. When I got down there, you just hike in and camp. So me and my buddy are putting up our hammocks, and all of a sudden you hear this ginormous primal yell, and then it sounds like someone threw a log off a tree. That's not any animal I've ever heard before, out of all the animals I've ever heard. And I look at my buddy and I'm like, what is that? And he goes, sounds like something dying. Don't worry about it. It's like, your mind will instantly Sparky. Yeah. So that's my buddy Sparky. But yeah, your mind will dismiss it and forget about it. And then at the same time, it's still in question. What was it I just heard? I don't know. I never seen anything. I sure heard something being thrown off a cliff that was massive. So, and that yell didn't sound like any animal I've ever heard before in Red River Gorge, but like, I'm not saying it's Bigfoot, but at the same time, what was it? It's like you just talk yourself out of everything all the time. So that's what we do as people.
Yeah. So, I think that's just a natural part of our defense mechanism for our sanity. In fact, even in that Fred, I hope I'm probably butchering his last name, Rolling. He was with a couple other people, and I remember during the story when they were basically being hunted by these wild hairy men. I'll never forget it. The guy the guy he's with just starts like he's in such a complete state of fear and terror and endangerment that he starts disassociating, and he's like, oh man, yeah, those fish prices, he just starts like talking like things that are not even related, and just like he's so gone that it's like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, come on, we got to get out of here. And it's like, it just psychology and the human brain and how we operate and work and neuroscience, that's the word I was thinking of, really fascinate me. So when you hear this and you hear how our brains operate and the things we do and the emotions and behaviors we elicit when we're under either extreme stress, endangerment situations, you know, where we might potentially die, or in this case, like trauma, it really only responds in certain ways. And I know, like, a big thing that people always say is, well, how come if you were in this situation, blah, 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 you didn't pull out your phone? Well, you have to understand that when you're put in a traumatic situation, that's a logical solution to that problem, right? Like that you have to think. But when you're in that situation, it's almost like this part of your brain, I want to say the frontal cortex, but I'm probably wrong. It almost like stops and you kind of go into like this fight or flight mode. And that's why everyone describes, you know, time stands still, because it literally does. Because almost your body like surges with adrenaline. And it's like, you know, you don't know what you're dealing with here. And so, you know, I know, of course, there's a myriad of situations that people can be in to have this happen. It doesn't have to necessarily be with like a cryptid or something. They could be in an actual, like, you know, fight or flight mode. But, you know, another great example of this is like, you know, think of the people that, you know, that end up in like a shooting or like a knife fight or like something's really severe where like they're fighting for their life. They're never once like, oh, I need to document this. You know, like, oh, let me just pull up my phone and take a picture. No, you're focused on like, I got to do this to survive, regardless of the situation. So I'm probably rambling on, but the point of the story is that it's really the mode that your brain turns into and how it becomes fight or flight is why most people don't think, well, I need to just stop a picture. It's, you know, and of course I know there's some that do. There's some that do, but it's,
if you're
when people talk about,
get the picture though.
Yeah. When people try to take like footage, you have to understand too that like it's so far away. And if you guys know anything about zooming in, you know, like the slightest move is like, yeah, and it's like, and of course it's really pixelated. So it's just, it's like, oh me, oh my.
Well, awesome, man, guys. We've been going for like an hour already. This is crazy.
So I just had one other question. So you, Josh, have you had any personal experiences out in the woods, unexplained things you've heard, seen?
I've had some experiences, absolutely, and I'd love to share them. So I've had two that I think would be worthy of sharing. The first one didn't actually happen in the woods. It happened in my house. And the second one was actually out. It wasn't in the woods, but it was on a road. And so anyway, so the very first one, this was back in 2017, I want to say. And I was at my parents' house at the time. And we had a guest bedroom where I was staying, and there was a desk, and I had my computer set up, and I was facing the wall like this. To my right is a bed, right there's a window, there's a ceiling fan, right? Nothing fancy. It's probably like maybe like a 12 by 12 room, just a typical bedroom. And the bedroom door is directly behind me. Now, sometimes, you know, growing up, my dad he's kind of a bit of a trickster. And so like sometimes, you know, he's the kind of guy that like, you know, will slowly creak the door open and kind of just like stare at you. And you'll turn around and be like, oh, Dad, get out of here. And, you know, you'll laugh and he'll walk away. And as I'm sitting there on my computer, I remember I kind of just got this feeling like, oh, someone's looking at you. And I thought, I'm like, Dad. And so I didn't turn my head. I turned my full body around, and I was getting ready to tell my dad off. And as soon as I turned my entire chair around and faced the door was closed. And then then the thought directly after that was, oh, that's strange. And within a couple of seconds, I kid you not, it's so strange. I feel this like gust of wind come at me.
Like energy?
Yeah. And within like, this is all in probably a matter of like 3 to 5 seconds. And as this kind of wind hits me, my first thought is, this can't be happening because there's no fan. There's no way that an air source could be coming at me. And to validate that this is truly happening, I was wearing shorts at the time. I looked down and I could see the hair on my leg doing this. So I'm like, okay, there's clearly a gust of wind coming out. And it wasn't like a continuous gust like a fan. It was just like a steady, like just a, so probably about like 2 seconds, right? And in that time, I began to feel like this static electrical energy around me. And I was like, this is weird. And so I was like, okay. I didn't really know what it was. And after a few seconds, it kind of stopped. But I was like, that was strange. Now, it wouldn't be till way later on that I've told that experience. People are like, oh, that's like, you know, something that I had like when I encountered a spirit, or like, you know, when I had a demon, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh, well, you know, again, the window wasn't open. The ceiling fan wasn't on. None of it made sense, right? It was weird. But when that happened, I wasn't like, it's a demon. I was like, okay, that's weird. I just wrote it off, right? Because some people do. I just wrote it off. Well, the next day, because when I was sitting at my desk, there's a wall to my left. My parents' room was right over there, right? So the very next day, I didn't say anything to anybody about it. My mom started telling me about this weird experience she had last night, which would have been because so when that happened, it was like evening, maybe like 4 or 5. That night, I guess my mom, she saw this like black shadow thing like come up out of the floor and like come at her. And so I don't know if they were connected or related. I don't know. We've had, when I say we, I mean me and my mother have both seen a doppelganger of my father like years ago, back in 2013. I remember there was one time, this is like back when I was early in my 20s. I was sitting on my bed and I remember I saw my father walk by, and then, you know, he walked out of the bedroom, and I walked out there to go talk to him, and I was like, why did you change back into your morning clothes? And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, we just saw you go in there and change. He's like, you're whacked out. You're making stuff up. And I'm like, no, like we watched you. Like what? It was the weirdest thing. And then, you know, I told my mom about it, and she's like, yeah, she's like, I've seen some stuff too. So I was like, oh, all right. So I don't know. Nothing really became of it. I didn't have any more experiences. It was just weird. Well, 2017, I'm sorry, not 2017. It was probably about like 2018, 2019. I'm driving on this really rural road, and I'm kind of up in the mountains, and this is at nighttime. And I remember looking out, and I saw, well, at least what I thought was a plane. And this is why it caught me off guard, is because where I was at the time, this isn't a place that planes fly, and it was flying low. And I thought, I'm like, okay, why would a plane be flying through here at night this low? And I kept like looking at it. I'm like, oh, this is strange. Like, I didn't necessarily like see any like, you know, blinking lights like you would on a plane. Like there was lights on it, but I don't know. I just, the fact that it was going as slow as it was and as low as it was like, wow, that's weird. But again, I didn't think like UFO or alien. And so the way I'm driving, it's like right here, right? So you're doing this, and I keep looking down like, why is it flying so low? And it was kind of just like drifting through the air. And then all of a sudden it just went whoosh and disappeared. Like it just shot off sideways and it didn't flash. It just gone. And I was like,
that's how they do.
Okay. And now again, I didn't think like UFO. I was like, I don't know what it was. It was just, I don't know. It was just a thing. It was something, right? It was something. So when I got home that night, you know, I didn't really, everyone was asleep. You know, I didn't really I wasn't changed by it. You know, I was like, well, like that's wild. Even to this day, I assume it was a UFO. Like, I don't know, but I just know like planes can't, you know, physically go do that. Right. So I'm like, so that's why I say, like, when I said earlier, I'm like, I'm kind of jaded and cynical in a way, but also like open-minded. Cause I'm like, well, you know I saw that, but like, I'm also not going to be the first one to be like, well, it was definitely this. Even though like all those things fit it categorically, I'm just like, well, I don't know. To me, it's still just a weird experience. It's like the whatever I had happened to me, everyone would probably say, dude, like that was an entity. Was it though? Was it an entity? You know, it's like, it was weird, whatever it was, but you know, I don't know. So yeah, I don't know. That's just me kind of coming to terms with everything I deal with, you know? So I don't know.
Very, very cool.
Yeah. Well, you do a great job on your channel. I mean, absolutely. Like you said, the storytelling is phenomenal. Thank you for bringing it up, Chris. But if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please go do it. Yeah. Watch a video, and the first video you watch, just tell them that you saw them on this live stream. But please check them out. You won't be disappointed. Everything is so organized from the beginning of the story to the end of the story. The illustrations that's in between, extremely professionally done. And it shows the success that you're having right now is because of the work you put into it.
Absolutely.
So I'm looking forward into diving much more into your channel. So like I said, I'm a month in and I'm loving it. So
absolutely.
And thank you so much for coming. We appreciate you sharing your stories with us.
Thanks for the invite.
It's a great conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I had a blast. Invite me back anytime.
Oh, you consider it done.
Yeah, open invite.
I have, because I've got some experiences. It's like we don't have time tonight, but I mean, like, just to share with you too, some different stuff in the woods and out of the woods. But
and he's gonna be like, "What do you think of this? Well, what do you think of this?"
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
They were gonna click. Why is Carlson on his channel?
If anyone out there has anything they want to talk about, share, like you guys could hit me up on Instagram. You could, there's an email there you could reach out to. I mean, there's numerous ways to contact me. So, don't hesitate. I don't bite. So yeah.
Awesome, man.
Awesome.
Right, well, thank you everybody in the chat for your questions. Thank you everybody for sticking with us. And once again, thanks for coming and tune in next time.
It was a nice night.